So welcome to session 12. This is our third panel for the day, and we're talking about the human factor here. We're talking about bringing people on the BIM journey. Now, throughout the last 12 hours or last 11 hours, you would have heard a lot of people talking about, in our other panel discussions, about training and the importance of incorporating training into practice. Today, I have with me two experts in the field. Now, first of all, we've got Paul Shilcock from Operam Academy. Now, Paul's Operam Academy has BIM training as an overall spectrum, but one of the things I think that's really important and focusing is on process. So one of the key factors or one of the key courses that Paul has as part of his system is ISO 19650 or Information Manager training. Now, we'll get into more detail regarding process training throughout this discussion. But now I'd like to go over to Pantelis, who's actually a member of Graphisoft UK and also part of their global BIM Manager course. So it's quite exciting to have these two gentlemen on board to discuss this topic today. I think from my perspective, training is often the poor cousin, I guess you could say, or the one that's left out the most when it comes to implementing any process, technology, tool, anything within a practice, be it a design practice or an architectural practice. But we always come on with the best intentions, and it always seems to fall apart. You know, I walked into a practice a couple of weeks ago, precursor said, this is the training you need to do before I spend my day with you to train you. And guess what? They hadn't even done it. So that's what we're here to talk about. We're here to raise awareness. We're trying to make everyone who's attending today to actually get the most out of their platforms, get the most out of their processes so they can deliver it successfully for their clients. And that's the main reason why we're here. So first of all, I'd like to hand over to Paul. And Paul, can you give a little bit of an introduction about yourself and Operam Academy for our attendees today so they get a little bit more of an understanding of your perspective and where you're coming from?
Yeah, sure. We run a management consultancy here in the UK called Operam. Essentially, we help organizations to align their business processes with the latest industry standards and best practice. A large part of that is educating people on those processes and in some cases re-educating those. So there's the training arm of Operam is Operam Academy. We sort of specialize in the more upstream activities in the information management process in terms of from the clients, in terms of the requirements definition, the procurement, the risk, the insurance, the contracts, the planning. So all the sort of things on the least sexy end of the BIM spectrum, but nonetheless very important. I guess in my spare time, I write a few standards. So I use all this knowledge and experience and get that down. I guess starting way back in 2011 when we started developing PAS 1192 Part 2, which is, if you're not aware, is the framework document for what we used to call BIM Level 2 here in the UK. And then being involved in the development of the 1192 series. And then in 2014, I was asked to elevate the 1192 series to international level. So I'm the author of ISO 19650 Part 2, the UK National Annex to Part 2, and co-author of PD 19650, which is the transition guidance for those organizations or projects transition from 1192 to 19650.
Yeah, no, I actually forgot all about that in my introduction for you, that we actually have a standards guide in the room. It is important to note, the importance that we have. It's great to have Paul here to discuss, obviously, the standard as the author and understanding how it works, which is really, really important. So, Pantelis, over to you, mate. Just want to give a little bit of an insight into your role at Graphisoft UK, and I guess your role kind of more so even at a global level within Graphisoft.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so hello everyone. I've been with Graphisoft for around about 3 years now, and I'm actually working at the global level, not just the UK level. So currently my role is the manager of the global professional services. So it's more geared towards consultancy, I would say. But obviously training is a vital part of consultancy as well. So I'm heavily involved in training sessions as well, training programs as well. my main focus in training is related to the Graphisoft BIM Manager program. And that's very, very relevant to what Paul does, but with a twist, with a different perspective. So we're huge believers that when you want to implement change in your workflows, you have to follow standards. And if you have an international standard in place, then why would you need to reinvent the wheel? So everything that we do is in relation to ISO 19650 from the perspective, obviously, from our solution, Archicad. I've always considered myself as an architect and with a special love for training. So all my roles in the past with the NBS here in the UK, with John Robertson Architect, which is an AJ 100 practice, were related to training to one way or another, either training being the focus or being a side job if you want. BIM management is a lot of things. Training is a big part of it. So it's been part of my professional life forever. And I'm a huge advocate of, whenever you need to implement change, you need to include this in your workflow, definitely.
Now, let's get into the questions, gentlemen. Now, first of all, this is, a pointed question in regards to my concerns that I see here personally when I go into businesses here in Australia. But it'd be good to see if it's a mirrored experience in the UK. Now, one of the things that I spend a lot of time doing is reading the UK standards, because here in Australia we're very laid back and relaxed. We don't have any standards whatsoever. We steal them all from you. Maybe it's the same thing with the royal family. I don't know. We steal a lot of things from the UK. But Paul, first of all, with you, and let's look at this at a kind of a broader side of things, because you're not just dealing with architects, you're dealing with the whole of industry, the whole supply chain, through consultants, through contractors, and also into the asset management side and the client side. Okay, so you're dealing with all of the different actors. In your experience, how well are you seeing training implemented into practices around processes?
Yeah. You're right. It does vary significantly in terms of, I guess we're quite fortunate to work with a lot of the organizations involved throughout the asset lifecycle. I think generally, for those who do sort of invest in the training side, the vast majority of that is based around the technology. I think, because generally it's either sort of packaged in or as part of that procurement, as you say, but unfortunately, not even a lot of organizations don't even do that. I guess the other approach is where we see, this BIM thing is something for a specialist team. So they will invest in getting that specialist team trained up with, I guess, that sort of expectation almost that they're then going to impart that knowledge throughout their organization. But without giving that team the time, the resources, the skills, to be able to do that, to go out into the business and actually train up. So a bit of a trainer type sort of thing. So that tends to be a little bit hit and miss. I think in the last few years, we're starting to see a lot of organizations, a lot of pre-qualification questionnaires coming out. So I think that's has been a positive, because that seems to have stimulated a little bit more investment in the training, because, in order to pre-qualify for a lot of the contracts out there, they need to demonstrate that they're investing in their people, or that, they've got a training strategy. Likewise with the certification. So, there seems to be a bit of a trend at the moment. A lot of organizations seeking certification around a lot of the different standards, particularly ISO 19650. And as part of that certification process, you need to be able to demonstrate that you've got a sort of training plan, or there's training available to those who need it. Both of those are, fairly successful, because it's a bit of a stick, and the top management will take notice, because they sort of have to, if they want to win the job, or if they want to get the certification, they have to. But I think, the ones who really succeed in this are the ones who actually genuinely want to build better teams within their own organization. They genuinely want to increase the capability and capacity of their workforce to be able to manage and produce information more effectively, because they're the organizations who are really seeing the business benefit, of working more efficiently, working more effectively, cutting out a lot of the wasteful activities that we generally see. And in terms of the focus, there does seem to be a bit of a shift now towards, looking more towards those upstream activities, rather than the production aspects of information management. So, particularly around the planning and the procurement stages. And we're also finding a lot of people in the supply chain, a lot of organizations as well, who are taken on or asked to support the client as well in terms of their upstream activities. So they need not only to be educated on what their bit of the process is, but also what the client's bit is in order to sort of help them. But yeah, and I think, a lot of what we're seeing as an organization now, and generally what we specialize in, is more looking at the individuals who play a role in that, on the supply side on the client side, it'll be the people defining the requirements, putting the invitation to tenders together. On the supply side, it's those responding to those, because they're the people really who need to understand what, the benefits of doing these activities, to support the downstream activities and the investment they've made in the technology. Because if they don't understand it, they will just leave it out. They'll just bypass it or whatever. So we need to sort of connect the two, that if you want to be successful in the production and use all the latest innovations and technology, you really need to get the upstream activities. And to do that, it's educating the people who are responsible for that.
Yeah, no, it's a hard thing. Here in Australia, we have a lot of clients that are highly uneducated and easily guided by experts, and I'm going to put inverted commas, experts in the field that don't really even say they're applying standards, but they're not really doing so. So we've talked about the overall process thing, and the positive is that from my perspective, it's happening well in the UK because of the fact that you got the pre-qualification requirements. Here in Australia, it's not a thing yet, and other places in the world, it's still not a thing. I'm part of Building Smart Australasia, and we're talking about how a certification that was set up before I became a board member was put in place, and there's no demand for it here in Australia because there's no one asking for certification. Now, that's kind of process driven. So moving over, Pantelis, to technology side, and Graphisoft, you've talked about Graphisoft not just having a focus on its tool itself. Before we delve in deeper, and it's just a matter of just touching the surface, what's been your experiences when you've gone into practices that are using Archicad and their ability to use it? What's the level of training that you're seeing currently within practice?
Mm-hmm. So I think there are two sides to that story, and both of those sides are not great. So I've seen a lot of examples where a company tries to implement change and they don't include their people. And actually, it's the people who are going to drive the change. It's not the high-level management. And those people being trained is one of the important factors. Smaller practices, I've seen examples where they think, we've got smart enough people, they'll figure it out. And then people go into a situation where they cannot use the tool, and they go crazy with it. And then you see other practices on the larger side where they do identify the need for training, but they approach it in the wrong way, where they try to do only generic training. And our industry has changed a lot. It's not anymore about selling a tool and implementing this tool. It's about selling a solution and making the solution part of your overall business processes, which need to become more efficient. So it's about the relevance. It's not about the generic training anymore. It's about making this bespoke to your workflows. And I think that's where, we come in as consultants to identify through a discovery process where you are and where you want to go, and build a plan which will take you to where you want to go in a specific amount of time, by involving all those people who are, important to this process. So I think relevance here is the most vital part of implementation, making sure that what we offer is bespoke enough to serve your needs. It's not just generic, how to training is how we use a tool, not how to use it in general.
Now, one of the comments that Paul raised when he responded to my question, and it's one of my favorite ones, it's this whole concept of a business will invest in, say, one person within their practice. And then the expectation is that one person then trains the rest of the organization. Is that something that you're seeing a lot of it as well when you're going on sites and dealing with customers?
That's right. It does happen. And I'm not sure if it's a cultural thing or if it is, a cost thing that people want to save money around implementation and training. But I don't think it's an efficient approach because having just one person across a whole practice driving this whole thing is just not efficient. And you need all those different perspectives, those different experiences. And usually what we realize in offices is that the people who are very literate with the tool are the people who haven't been with the practice for a long time. They don't know the culture of the practice. So in reality, you need to involve people from all different levels who have been with the practice for a number of years, who know the culture, and the new people, the more tech-savvy people who would really like to drive this. So I really think you need to build a team around that if you want to have successful implementation.
So we've talked about the bad stories, and Paul, because people that you're dealing with are most of the time, obviously, well, not obvious, that's a bad word to be using, isn't it? Talking to a standards man and using legal terms, it's like as if I'm talking to May Winfield, I'll get slapped. But taking a step into the positive side, so we've kind of talked about the horror stories we've seen. What are some of the good examples you've seen within practice that some of the businesses that you've dealt with? What's the secret sauce to some of these practices doing well?
Well, if I knew the exact recipe for that sauce, I'd be a very rich man. But I think now there are some really good organisations there who get it, and I understand. It's a lot more difficult as well for the smaller practices, of which in terms of there is the vast majority of the industry. But yeah, generally the ones who are sort of a little bit more mature are the ones who will have some sort of learning development, individual or team or capacity within their own organisation. But I think, in terms of what I think probably is a successful one is that understanding, it is a process. We're using the right terminology about it being a process. It's a set of interrelated activities, that convert an input to an output and so on, like any other process. And there are individuals who are responsible for different activities within that process. So it's really about understanding, not everybody in the organization needs to be an expert in the entire end-to-end process. They only need to be capable or competent to undertake their bit of the activity. Yes, they need to have awareness of what happens before their bit and what happens after their bit, but predominantly it's about what they do. So we've worked with a few organisations around trying to identify what these different roles and responsibilities are. Again, that's very difficult for most organisations. Well, particularly the larger ones will have a myriad of different roles. Just looking at some of the sort of terms. I mean, we're thankfully we're moving away from BIM over here, but I know in Australia, particularly digital engineering is a key aspect, and you've got digital construction, and anything digital now is a big part. So it's very difficult based on roles. So we did an exercise where we mapped. The only list of roles that we've got that I'm aware of is the roles table within Uniclass, which sets out. But even that, it's about 100 odd different roles. So the activity was, okay, well, if you map all of your roles to that, and then we could map the Uniclass roles, and we got it down to 8 different functions within the organization, because 8's a bit more of a manageable number. And we looked at the different management functions within the organization, where you've got project manager design management, construction management, asset management, commercial management, a lot of the management functions. And then we looked at, okay, so if everyone fits into one of those 8 boxes, what do those, what knowledge does each of those functions need? And then so you start to tailor the education to a function. To do it to a role is very difficult because it's so on. To get it down to a manageable thing. And then, so once you got to that point, it's then, okay, well, how do you incentivize the individuals then to sort of, undertake that training? Yeah, there's there's the whole stick side of things in terms of, making it mandatory or whatever. But obviously the carrot side tends to have that more effect in terms of, communicating with them why the need, what's in it for them if they, undertake this training and acquire this knowledge. Yes, make it part of their personal development plan. So, it becomes a key part of their role and they understand the importance. But yeah, looking at, how to incentivize the individual is important. And then, once they've done that, the next thing, I think probably what we're seeing really a lot of success with is what we call social learning. So it's about bringing individuals together, just to have a conversation, to talk about what they've learned, to reinforce their understanding, but to try and generate that shared understanding amongst the group. This whole process is that, we talk about collaboration and collaborative work and collaborative production of information. All that means that you can't do this as a team sport. You have to be able to work together. And so by having that social learning, that's really started to bring the training to life, and all those light bulb moments of, okay, I get it now. So I understand what you need to do and what I need to do, because what I do impacts what you've got to do, and all of this sort of thing. So yeah, if there was a secret recipe, there's probably some of the key ingredients.
Pentel, is there anything to add to that from your side in terms of what you've seen as good practice within some of the practices that you visited?
Yeah, I've got actually a very similar view with Paul. Less standardized, if you want, but I love Paul's approach. I think identifying those roles is very, very important. So what we've done in some projects which were very successful, there was a common approach, and the common approach was related to 2 things. First one, identify the vision, and second one, identify the current workflows. Once you do that, then you know how a practice works, and then you can break down the people in those different groups and identify the relevant education that they need, and then you offer that relevant education to them. And straight away, because what they are taught about is part of their role, is part of their job, their everyday job, they become interested in the whole thing. And this can drive the change in a much easier way. Also, mixing different media, I think, is important. People learn in different ways. So either it's a self-paced online course, a trainer-led online course, a face-to-face meeting, or, as Paul said, a group where people will exchange views and ideas of what they've learned is very important when it comes to implementation. Not everybody learns in the same way. So you need to take under account the human factor in that whole process and make sure you serve for every different character that you've got in your practice.
I think I've a colleague that I know that I used to work with some of our education projects when I worked at Fulton Trotter was a pedagogy expert and a futurist. So he helped us actually develop and design schools specifically to enable teaching for moving into the future. So I should have asked Stephen to come along. Unfortunately, I forgot. But that's the thing. But one of the things that I often talk about, and for people that don't know me very well, I'm very, very passionate about AFL football. So I spend a lot of time following my local team and participating in events with them. But one opportunity I had was to actually listen to their coach talk about their side. Now, when you look at a sporting team, it's the same sort of scenario as you have in business. And highly successful teams are highly similar to highly successful businesses. Now, every single player that's on that field doesn't perform every task, like you said, Paul. Your role is to stand in this position and to undertake this task and deliver this task. And by the team working together collaboratively, they score their goals, they win the game. There's times when they drop the ball and it all falls over. But one of the other key messages that I think that's really, really important with this, and it ties back to teaching and learning around the role and around certain people's particular skill sets, comes down to the recruiting process. And this is something that I find really, really interesting in the professional sports. When they're recruiting to fill a team, they don't just go and say, I just want an architect, we turn this into a practice. I just want an architect. You want to find an architect that is highly skilled in detailing construction knowledge. So it's the same scenario as if you're trying to find someone to fill a particular role on a football field. Now, that person comes with a certain set of skills. And just say, for example, this person, is really, really highly skilled in detailing skins of buildings. Now, if you're a practice that designs very complicated building skins, then he's the man that you want on your team. You don't want someone that has no idea how building skins go together. And I guess the other thing comes into it again with recruiting. You can teach people that are willing to learn, but you can't teach people that aren't willing to learn. So that whole personality thing is really, really important. And I've found that over the years that some people thrive once you throw them into something and teach them. But I think the key thing to understand here is that every single person doesn't need to know everything about how to use Archicad. Every single person that's here today doesn't need to understand everything about ISO19650 or other standards or processes that you may have in place. But in your role, it's very important that you practice and train and learn how to do those certain tasks that you are specifically employed to do so you can do it faster. It means you don't have to work late at night. It means you get to go home and enjoy your life and actually do other things in time. But Pentelis, moving on from that, I think now's the kind of time to probably share with the audience a little bit more about the kind of offerings that you have from your side and also from Paul's side. But can you let the attendees that haven't seen it before on social media or through other channels, through their local Graphisoft outlets or their resellers, can you share us a little bit about Graphisoft Learn and what that platform is all about?
Sure. It is a project we started a few years ago within Graphisoft, and it's been commercially known as Graphisoft Learn in the last couple of years. It's essentially an online learning platform which is accessible at learn.graphisoft.com. The vision is that we want to make BIM knowledge available to everyone who uses Archicad, the necessary BIM knowledge. We have different means that we do that. So there are a number of basic courses, intermediate courses, all the way to expert level courses, which is the BIM Manager program, which I'll talk about it in a minute. We have different media. We have self-paced courses, which you can do at your own time, or trainer-led courses where you need to be in front of your screen at a specific time and you're actually talking to a human being, right? Like we're doing right now. And that offers a completely different experience. We've got webinars that you can watch online or ebooks, which you can download. And these talk about the challenges, some of the challenges that you've got to tackle in Archicad. And we offer the best practices, what we think is best ways to deal with those. The BIM Manager program, I think it's probably the tip of the iceberg of the whole Graphisoft Learn program. It's been in my hands for the last couple of years now, and it changed a lot of faces. So the last version is that 10-week online course that we offer. And it is borderline consultancy because it talks a lot about processes as well. It's not just about the tool. As I said, from a different perspective from what Paul does, but it does talk about ISO 19650 a lot and all the related workflows to that. We always, go back to that vision that we are in the knowledge sharing business. We've got a lot of highly skilled people at Graphisoft. A lot of them are coming directly from the industry. I used to be a BIM manager up until a couple of years ago. we have a lot of consultants who are coming directly from practicing architecture. So we think we know what our users want, and we try to package it in a way that it is accessible to them in different ways, and they can get access to it. The platform is open to anyone, so anyone can create an account and go into the platform. A lot of the content is offered for free to customers who are on what we call SSA, who are on a contractual relationship with Graphisoft. And then other courses are paid, like the BIM Manager program, for instance, which is the more high level training that we offer.
No, I always pointed, over the last decade, I've always pointed people to Graphisoft's website, because I believe that the base training that's available there is really well kind of a great starting point for people to learn the generic way of using the software before they then learn a practices methodology of actually working. When is the next BIM Manager course coming up for people that might be interested? So
the next one is on May 3. And as I said, it's a 10-week course, so it will last up until at some point in July time. And there is a website which collects all the different BIM Manager courses. It's called bimmanager.graphisoft.com. So there is availability in 7 different languages at the moment. It's not just the international version. And this is actually a direction where we want to go with the whole of the Graphisoft Learn initiative. We want to have a more global reach. So there is a project right now which we're working on localizing a lot of the material. Wherever you're based in the world, you will have a different view of the system, either in relation to the language, which is obvious, but also in relation to local practices, local standards. So the courses will be tailored to a country's standards and a country's needs.
Now, Paul, I have to admit, asking you about your course and all about it, I'm only partway through it right now. I haven't even got a chance to finish it. Unfortunately, things have gotten busy over the last month, and was very grateful for you providing me access to that through Christina. She tried to. I did her a favour, and she's asked you for a favour. So I can attest to what I've done so far as being quite powerful content. But for the people that are here today, do you want to give us a little bit of an outline about what Operam Academy is and what they can offer people that are here today, specifically probably more so for the UK contingent and people over there, but more so hopefully when people are staying up late and here in Australia specifically, where the governments are starting to ask for ISO 19650 processes as part of their delivery now. Share with us a little bit about your program.
Yeah, I mean, I guess before we sort of branded it as Operam Academy, it was, as I say, as part of our advisory services, we found that there was this huge gap in knowledge. So going back to when PAS 1192 Part 2 was published, this became, it was about to become, in the UK at least, mandatory on all public procurement from 2016. And so I guess it sounds a bit cheesy, but the main reason for starting to put this education together was because there was no way we were going to do it without educating the clients and the supply chain to do that. So it was more a case of, the Bleeding Red wrote the standard now. We've got to make sure that people can use it as well. And so we started off doing a lot of instructor-led training, which is something that I personally really enjoy, and particularly when we've been fortunate enough to go in a lot travel around the world, including Australia a few times to do some training. But obviously there's a thing around the scalability of that in terms of the instructor-led. So we still do instructor-led training in terms of bespoke type sort of, based around a set of learning outcomes for a particular organization. But when really I started in 2014, started to develop the ISO, obviously I was in a little bit of a privileged position to, in terms of writing the standard, to be able to put that together, because the opportunity there was, initially it was about the UK construction industry needs educating. Now it's about globally and the global construction industry. And as much as I'd be keen to do it, I'd be spending my life on the road training if that was the case. So in terms of the scalability, we looked at, we really need to get some of this content online. So we set about 3 years ago, developing. We brought in a structural designer who was, again, an expert in pedagogy, and to basically take what was floating around in my head and turn that into something that was engaging. Because if what is, let's face it, is not the most exciting subject matter. We also developed it in collaboration with a company called BAM, or Royal BAM, which is a large contractor a European contractor based in the Netherlands. And so that gave us some really great insight in terms of, we ran some focus groups about, what people wanted to learn, how they wanted to learn, when they wanted to learn, and what device they wanted to learn. And we got an opportunity to speak with all of these different functions, the project managers, the commercial managers, and so on. And so that really fed into it. So we developed this platform. So you've got all my knowledge and experience in there. It's developed. All of our graphics are being custom made, and we've worked really hard to try and make it as engaging as possible. And so and we've targeted it at the global market. We did set about, as Pantella said, we had this idea that we would make regional content as well. But that has proved quite tricky as well, because it's not every country has I do a lot of work in the US, for example. We're supporting them as part of Scientific Digital Britain. And in the US, there's such a whole host of standards. It's difficult to know what the standard is to say this is the standard in the US. And it's a little bit like in Australia, where you've got the different states. You'd almost have to do it at a state level, because even in Australia, you can't. A lot of you can't come up with it and agree a federal standard. So you've all got to be different. So that is a little bit of a challenge from a standards perspective. But yeah, essentially, our focus is not the people who produce the information. It's more about the people involved in the upstream activities to make sure that the right commercial and collaborative environment is in place for the architects and all the people involved in the production. They're able to do that in the right way, and they're not constrained. So we've got a mixture of self-led, and we've just launched our IM bootcamp training, which has been really great in terms of that social learning. We were really trying to struggle about how can we bring that together. So there's elements of self-led, then there's working as in pairs to develop some preparation. Then we've got some group sessions, which we did run as an instructor-led, but because of COVID, we've converted to online. And then there's some sort of research and report writing. So there's as Pantella says, getting that mixture of approaches to learning has been really great. But I think the shared understanding, and not just learning from myself, but learning from each other within the organisation has been really great. So and moving forwards, we're looking to expand that out into other complementary standards as well, around not just about information management, but asset management, and a few of the other standards that are out there.
A little bit of level of information need. That'd be an interesting one in itself. But
so we've got, just from a standards point of view, there's a new standard being published over here in Europe on the level of information need. So we are looking to develop some content around that. So that'll be out hopefully later this year. At some point, I guess the expectation that might become an international standard as well. So we'll have to see. Well,
as soon as it came out, I bought it. So
right.
It's a standard, I think, that once you read it, the whole concept of the ISO 19650 series actually makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's actually about clients actually being in charge of the decisions and what information they get delivered throughout the project, which up until recently, or here still in Australia, they still just accept what they're given, which is a huge frustration. But gentlemen, we've run out of time. We've filled it full of 40 minutes of stuff. I had another pile of questions to give to you, but before we head over to the Q&A, what would be your one point, Pantelis, that you think that people should take away regarding training within their practice?
I think it's got to be variety. Try to offer all the different media that you can, because people learn in different ways, and then you'll get them engaged.
Yep. And Paul, what's your thoughts? What's your one takeaway that you think?
Well, I think I've harped on enough about social learning. I think I would probably go with quality over quantity. I think, it's people are short on time, and try and make it as relevant, as another team, trying to make it specific to their role. So it's quality over quantity.
And people are short on time these days as well, so they try and squeeze things in all over it. But thank you very much for your time, gentlemen. Let's go over to the questions from the audience.
So thanks very much, gents, for that exciting panel. It's been very quiet here in the chat box throughout this last session. It'd be great to see some questions from the audience. I know that you guys are out there. Carl, I see that you're advising us exactly what's going on. The conversation's hitting the nail right on the head. David Little, we've got a fanboy here for the boys. Penn tells us he loves you, and he's not worthy of you, Paul. So, any questions or comments from the audience at all before I have to try and make some stuff up? And I guess the hardest thing, right now for people is that, here in Australia, people are having some beer. In the UK, it's the mid-morning, and on a Friday, you've probably got deadlines that you're trying to hit in the UK.
There's a rare ray of sunshine in the UK as well today, so I suspect everyone's making to that as well.
So who will actually want to sit in front of a computer when you've actually got sunshine and the skies aren't grey in the UK? But
that's right. It's almost lunchtime, so they would hit the pubs very soon, I guess.
What a perfect way to learn about Archicad. Sit here with a beer and learn some more. All right, guys, we've got the questions rolling through now. So David Little's working for a residential builder. He wants to know how he should convince upper management that ISO is worth taking up. Now, that's an interesting challenge you put forward there, David. But for residential builders, Paul, what value do you think for them? So the thing is, normally ISO 19650 is client driven. What benefits would there be for a member of the supply chain, an actor in the supply chain, actually implementing these processes themselves internally?
Yeah, I think for any size of organisation, and now there's a perception that the standards in 19650 is only for the big mega projects. But the research shows that we see waste in construction right across the industry. Myself, in a previous life, I've worked for a major housing developer here in the UK. And again, it's not, they don't just do everything on their own. They have a supply chain. They have a number of partners. A lot of it is about repeatability. A lot of it is about being able to do the sort of just-in-time delivery with the off-site manufacture. So what are those things that you want to do in terms of trying to get those efficiencies within the house building sector? A lot of that is driven by a unified approach to how that information is managed and how that information is produced by all the different stakeholders within it, not both at a sort of a group level. So it tends to be a lot of the housing stock will be developed at the group level, and then at the site level as well for each of the particular developments. I'm sure each of those have got mature processes that they've developed over many years. What we're starting to see now is this: what ISO gives you is a unified approach, a global approach. So it doesn't matter who your supply chain are. If they're familiar with the national and global standards, then they should be able to plug straight into your process.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of benefits as well in standardising the way in which you produce maintenance manuals, for example. Now, and having all of your subcontractors actually providing you information in a structured format, so it's going to be consistent. And I'm assuming that a builder will be working with multiple subcontractors anyway, so you wanted them to be delivering it each the same way, rather than being in a situation whereby each time you're working with a different subcontractor, they're going to be, this plasterer provides his manual this way, this plasterer provides it another way. So I'll start with a question with you, Pentelis, from Rowan. And Rowan's asking, from your perspective, and this is obviously you're on the training selling side, and I've got my views on this, but how do you justify training from a budgetary cost perspective or point of view?
Mm-hmm. It is very important to understand what the benefits would be after you've gone through that training, and if that will make you more efficient, if that will make it easier for you to produce information which will be coordinated with other consultants, and you won't have to go through rounds of coordination and wasting time with whatever workflows you're using right now, that justifies the cost very, very easily. At the same time, if you're talking about a higher level and we're talking about upskilling a whole of a practice, imagine the more projects that you'd get and you'd be able to complete in the same time as you did before. So I think it's defining the goals. It's not just about doing training for the sake of it. It's understanding why you want to get on board with a specific training scheme or whatever it is, and it will justify the cost very, very easily, because then you will know that my goal was to get to that point, and I got to that point because of that training. We have a few examples from the past. One is very, very recent, when we had one of our clients who also, some members of them attended our BIM Manager program. They got certified for ISO 19650 through BSI here in the UK. And I don't have specific information if the program helped them or not, but I presume some of the information that was shared there was valuable to them. And that's a big plus. That easily justifies the cost of training straight away.
Yeah, well, Paul, you've been providing training not regarding Archicad, but regarding ISO 19650. From your perspective, what's your thoughts on this in this take in terms of getting a return on investment?
Yeah, it is a very tricky area, and I think certainly for the type of training that we provide, which is more process-based, more knowledge-based, it's even more difficult. I get the fact if you're doing skills-based training on a particular tool, then you could sort of do some sort of measurement to say, well, previously it took you 2 hours to do this task. Now after training, it's going to take you half hour. So I think with the process side, and the knowledge, it needs to be wrapped up in an overall strategy in terms of what you're trying to achieve as a business. And if you look at the sort of the classic people, process, and technology perspective, what we're finding is a lot of organizations are, heavily investing in the technology, both in the hardware and the software. They're starting now to sort of look at things like ISO 19650 and the other standards in terms of aligning their business processes to that. And as Pentelis says, a lot of these now are getting certified against to demonstrate that they're able to manage and produce information in accordance with these standards. And what they often neglect is the people side. They think, right, okay, we've cracked it. We've got all the software, we've got our badge. Job done. Yeah. And that's where the problem starts. So it's the type of training in terms of the knowledge based and the process training is actually to underpin. Is actually to then to follow you need to educate and build capacity within your workforce to be able to undertake those processes, and which are then going to facilitate those wider gains and outcomes that you're looking to achieve.
Yeah, and the one comment that I often think about, and it's one that I always remember, is, what happens if I train them and they leave? And the flip side being, well, what happens if you don't train them and they stay? And I think that the biggest challenge is that when investments are made, rightfully, wrongfully, but as you say, the key thing is you've got to think about the technology, the process, and the people. And it's very quickly thought about when this processes and technology is implemented. They go, oh, well, here's the hardline costs for the software, and it's often forgotten how much it actually costs to train people. And that needs to be considered as part of the whole package, because I often talk about a template that I created once for Archicad, and essentially it was like a Ferrari, and if you gave that Ferrari to someone without the training, they would crash and burn, and they'd be really highly inefficient, and you could have these really sophisticated tools that could be useless without it. And that's kind of an approach I take. So I'm hoping that that's what people have taken away from this session, that the importance of training and what they need to do, you need to do within your practice. And my view is that you got to get in and provide that training. And there's times where I've used techniques where you kind of share lunch breaks, where you kind of say, well, I'll buy you lunch if you come and do your training during your lunch break. So you don't lose productivity, but then you're providing a feed for your staff if you're really that much challenging. So it's
the other thing I would add on to that is, again, these organisations who are investing in the technology and the process, the type of our biggest user base is around the people involved in the upstream activities within the process. And these are the people that you want to educate. You need to educate in order to actually exploit the opportunities downstream in order, for the technology and the data. So we're looking at educating like the clients in terms of their requirements, the procurement team, the legal teams, the commercial teams, the project management teams, design manager, construction management. These are all people who are making decisions both pre-contract and post-contract about, who've got the greatest influence to determine the outcomes downstream. And if you don't educate those and you only really focus in on the authors or your technicians or engineers, architects, then they're going to be increasingly frustrated because there's still all the thing that's coming down to them. They're not able to actually exploit the opportunities that they're able to.
Yeah, this is an interesting comment from Damien that's just popped up. It's talking about the big problem with staff turnover in all areas of construction. I actually think that that's a bit of a fallacy. So in my old practice at Fulton Trotter, we had staff that didn't leave. It's because we had a good culture. So people turn over because the pay's bad, or the culture's crap, or the projects you're working on are bad. If you can actually solve those key problems first, people don't leave and people stay, and you build on it. But then, why would you employ people, and if you know they're going to leave anyway? I don't know. It's a bad. You got to try and look at an upward cycle spiral instead of a downward one, unfortunately. And yes, there are a lot of practices that are focused in that.
That's not an information management thing. That's not even unique to the construction industry. I think in any industry, if you don't value the individuals within your team, then they are going to leave. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? And it's not just about obviously investing in training is one aspect of it. Absolutely, in terms of culture and work ethic and all the other things that people want to be part of as part of an organisation.
Yeah, and Patricia's got one comment about being successful and how implementation is desirable to have a percentage of a team already with intermediate knowledge of the tool in advance. That might work for Archicad, but it can't work for every single tool that you implement in the practice, because you can't find experts in every tool you need to actually do these things. So what you probably need, that is that you actually have people that are actually capable of adapting very quickly to new processes. That's kind of what I think when you're employing people, you want to find primarily, for me, it was good architects, and then secondly, people that are good and adaptive to new technologies and processes, and that can actually move forward and adapt and change as you move. David finished off with people leave bad managers, full stop. I think that's a perfect way to end it. And so we can have a little break before our next session so that people can go and have a coffee or a tea, or their lunch. As Bjorn pointed out, in Germany, it's lunchtime right now. So thank you very much, gentlemen, for participating in today's session. Your knowledge and expertise has hopefully been beneficial for our delegates today. And thank you once again.
Thank you for the invite.
All right, guys, we'll see you back in about 5 minutes' time.